Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Dangerous Thoughts here on Unsafe Space. I'm your host, Carter Laren. Let me know in chat, by the way, if I have a little air conditioner on in the corner, if it's bothering the mic. If the background noise is too much, let me know, and I'll get up and turn it off. But welcome. Today is Wednesday, September 7th, 2022. Like I said, I'm Carter Laren, and you're watching Dangerous Thoughts here on Unsafe Space. Today's agenda is going to be a little bit different. It's a different kind of a show than I normally do. We're going to walk through Biden's speech at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. We're first going to talk about the status of the culture war, what it is, and the status of it, because I think that context really matters for understanding his speech. So that's all we're going to do today. We're just going to, if you haven't seen his speech, that's fine. You're going to watch the entire thing with me today. So it should be fun. Don't forget to make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Also, please share this content. Anything you can share really does help us. Lots of the topics we cover on this particular show are evergreen topics. So if you're looking for something specific, just let us know. Maybe we'll find it in an old show, or we'll make it if we need to make it. So before we get started, I am going to say one thing. Dawn in chat. Hi, Dawn. Dawn said you should have added the little mustache to that. She's talking about the screenshot that we're using from Biden's speech that's on the thumbnail for this episode. Funny story. I don't know if it's funny, but I thought the same thing. I actually went and I was going to make a version of the entire speech that had, instead of the presidential seal on the podium, I had copied one of the, I forget what it's called, but like that eagle, that Nazi eagle symbol. And I replaced it on the podium. But unfortunately, the camera during the speech moved around enough that it got to be a pain to actually, in a waste of time, to do that on the video. But I almost did something similar. I didn't put a mustache on him, but I almost did that. So, and welcome Sean, who says he or she is psyched to be able to be here live for once. I'm glad to have you. All right. This is a weird show, so you picked a weird one. So let's just talk about why this speech is important. As you guys know, I don't usually talk too much about politics directly, although I think this speech is less really about policy and politics and more about culture and ideas, which is why I think it's important. There's a few reasons I think that we should really be talking about it. One is that the style is pretty striking. It struck a nerve with a lot of people for obvious reasons, which you'll see if you haven't seen it before. Another reason is the context of the speech. I mean, this was at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. The timing was interesting as well. And then obviously the content of the speech. I think we should be asking ourselves, what's the goal of the Biden administration here? How are they trying to go about achieving that goal, not just in terms of style, but in terms of content? What does political rhetoric that is just meant to manipulate look like? And interestingly enough, people might argue, oh, philosophy doesn't matter. We should be pragmatic and talk about policy issues and whatever. But whenever a politician needs to rally people, you'll notice that they can't help but use philosophic language. They can't help but use abstract philosophic terms. They don't define them, that's intentional, but they need to evoke those terms because that people, I think, viscerally understand the value of some of these, even if they can't actually define them. So we're going to go through that. We're going to go through that speech with that in mind. All right. Here we go. By the way, I set up today for some reason. It's just my own fault. I've got to click tabs over to see chat, so I'm going to check once in a while. If anyone wants to jump in when we're going through some of this, feel free to, but I'm going to stop the video a lot. But before we get to the video, I am going to talk about here the 6 elements of the culture war that we're in, because this context matters, and I think you need to understand. At least this is my analysis of it. So maybe Maybe there's 7, maybe there's 5, maybe I'm missing some stuff. But we need to understand what's going on in the culture war in order to really understand the context of the speech. And here I'm using the word culture as a stand-in for philosophical principles. These are the core ideas that are the foundation of a culture. So the culture wars aren't about, what kind of food we're going to eat or what kind of art we like or that kind of thing. They're about really core principles that permeate the values that we share in society, our shared values. And predominantly the culture war in America is about is a battle between collectivist ideas and individualist ideas. That shouldn't surprise you that I'm saying that, because if you watch this show, you hear that all the time. On the collectivist side, you have, by the way, I've just given up on monetization. I'm going to use the word Nazi, and I'm sure we'll get in trouble for that. On the collectivist side, you've got Nazis, Marxists, like the Soviets and the Nazis, all in one collectivist camp. They're both there. Very minor variations between those two systems. They're not really that different. And on the other side of the culture war, you have the individuals, which is represented by like the American culture. And when I say the American culture, I mean kind of the founding principles of America that made it unique. And so the first battle here in the culture war involves the role of free will. I'm going to put this back up just so you can see. This is what I'm calling the idea of intersectional fatalism versus individual agency. How do I do that? This intersectional fatalism versus individual agency. And intersectional fatalism is this idea that your actions, your beliefs, your dreams, your hopes, your goals, your disposition, your level of success in life predominantly depends on your group memberships. Of course, the term intersectional is a neologism with respect to like Soviet and Nazi era stuff, but the idea is very similar. And so it's this idea that your group membership matters. So in Nazi Germany, this was predominantly your biological, your ethnic group membership because they were racists. In Marxist cultures like the Soviet Union, this was a cultural or social group membership, so being a member of the bourgeois or whatever. And of course, Marxists were much more focused on economic class. Nazis much more focused on ethnicity. Today, on that side, on the side of intersectional fatalism, in America, we have the progressives, and they are predominantly biological and ethnic essentialists. That's predominantly how they group memberships. They're just more similar to the Nazis than the Marxists, right? They less so about economics, more so about ethnic status or ethnic group membership. They do allow for a little bit of free will, which we'll talk about in a minute, which does make them a little bit different from the Nazis, but that's kind of how the progressives look at it. They're on the intersectional fatalism side, not on the individual agency side in terms of the role of free will. Of course, the Enlightenment position, the American position is that you have personal choice. You have individual will, and you have individual agency, right? You're not a sum of the groups to which you belong. You are an individual who makes your own decisions, and yeah, you might have some influence from other things, but the prevailing predominant outcomes are based on your own agency. Okay, so that's that. That's the one aspect of today's culture war. The next one, I'll put this just back up so we can see it again, is in ethics. In the realm of ethics, it's a battle between social justice. I put the word justice here in quotes intentionally. Social justice versus individual responsibility. And again, on the social justice side, there's this idea that you are simply one manifestation, one instance of a group. And that you're in, those groups are categorized. They're either victim groups or oppressor groups, but you're in one of those groups. And the alleged sins of other members in that group fall on your head. because of as a function of your membership into that group. So ethically, you're responsible for the alleged sins of other members in that group, and that can manifest in terms of restitution that's asked for you, or vengeance taken out upon you, or that kind of thing. So again, this is pretty clear with Nazism, right? A Jew in Nazi Germany suffered for being Jewish, right? And they were painted as oppressors. I mean, there's you can hear language about how, you know, they're vile and blah blah blah, but they were painted as people exploiting and hurting the German. They were ruining the German purity. In many ways, that was the argument, right? So if you were a Jew in Nazi Germany, you didn't suffer for any particular individual action that you did. You suffered because you were a member of this group, and so you received that kind of collective judgment. And by the way, the term social justice used by here's a quote from the failed painter. He says, this is a quote on why he's anti-Semitic. He says, because it seems inseparable from the social idea, and we do not believe that there could ever exist a state with lasting inner health if it is not built on internal social justice. And so we have joined forces with this knowledge. Totally right up their alley. If you look at the Soviets, obviously they were not as racially focused. They were more focused on economics. But similarly, if you were a member of the wrong class, the quote oppressor class, which in Soviet Russia was the bourgeois, right? If you were a member of the bourgeois, you would suffer, even if you were a child. So not for your individual action, but vengeance was taken out on you, or you were expected to make restitution or whatever. Belongings were taken, whatever. You were quote, social justice, or justice was extracted from you for the alleged sins of the membership, your other members in your group, right? And the alleged sins, obviously, of the bourgeois was being successful. That was a sin as far as the Marxists were concerned, and so membership in that group was sufficient. In fact, if you remember when we read Gulag Archipelago, there's a section in it in which the secret police specifically just say, when you're questioning someone, the question isn't what they did or whether they did this thing or that thing. It's, are they a member of this class? Are they a member of the bourgeois class? Because if the answer is yes, then off to the gulag, right? So that's how that worked in those two cultures. In modern progressive culture, it's a little bit more nuanced. All the idea of this social justice in the progressive culture is all the quote non-oppressed groups. So those would be the oppressors, but all the non-oppressed groups should provide social and sometimes economic restitution to the oppressed groups, right? So you're expected to apologize for membership in the oppressed class, right? And go out of your way, perhaps give special preference to people in the oppressed class. Because you're in, sorry, I don't know if I just said oppressor or oppressed class, but you're supposed to apologize for being a member of the oppressor class. And you're supposed to go out of your way to either make restitution or give special treatment and benefits to members of the oppressed class, not based on what you've done or anything that they're doing, but obviously being a member of the class. The mechanics here in American progressivism are slightly more complex than just the race class thing of Nazism or Marxism. I think the way American progressivism works is there's a baseline classification based on race and ethnicity. So that's similar to the Nazis, but they superimpose it with a kind of a carrot and stick plan to help the idea propagate, to help their ideology propagate. And the carrot here is, well, if you're in the oppressor class, the punishment that you need to suffer for your sins can be mediated if you demonstrate ideological compliance. So self-hating oppressors can get away with maybe just a little bit of restitution or whatever. The ones who aren't self-hating, the ones who don't accept this, they get full vengeance, right, against them. But the self-hating ones maybe get a stay of execution a little bit. So that's the carrot. And the stick part of progressivism is your status in the victim group gets revoked if you don't comply with the ideology. You become an oppressor because you're channeling the ideas of the oppressors. So that's kind of the social justice component of ethics, and that's that side of the culture war. But of course, on the other side is the individual responsibility side, and that is you are responsible for your own actions and only your own actions, right? The kind of a American viewpoint on this is you can't punish the son for the sins of the father, right? Everyone's born with a moral clean slate, right? So that's the difference between on ethics, the social justice versus individual responsibility aspect of the culture war. In terms of sovereignty, let's put this up just again. In terms of sovereignty, we're on number 3. This component of the culture war is really about collective utility versus individual sovereignty. So what I mean by that is collective utility means that you are a means to an end. And that end is determined by the collective, by the group, right? So, this is very obvious in both Soviet and Nazi cultures, but, Lenin talked about the dictatorship of the proletariat, right? Whatever they wanted, they got. They were absolute dictators. The masses were the dictator. That's what obviously someone decided that they represented the masses, as always needs to happen. But they had ultimate power. They were the dictators. So a member of Soviet culture meant that you were a pawn for use by the proletariat in whatever way the proletariat saw fit. So there was a lot of indoctrination into the collective way of life. And this wasn't obviously invented by the Soviets. This goes back to Marx. If you look at his 10 planks, they're mostly about subordination of the individual to the collective. So that's the collective utility versus individual sovereignty part for Soviets. For Nazis, there was a moral principle in Nazism that was repeated often, which was public interest before self-interest, right? And so they meant that for economics, just like the Marxists did, but they also meant it for marriage and other things as well. They were, I think, more consistent than the Marxists on collectivism and collectivist principles. So that's what you have on one side of the culture war. Of course, on the other side of the culture war, and I guess I didn't really talk about American progressives, but if you look at how the language is, and you'll see this in Biden's speech a lot, there's a lot of the will of the people, the will of the people. That's stand-in language for dictatorship of the proletariat. It's the same kind of thing as public interest before self-interest, right? It's this idea that the will of the people, the democracy, right? Pure, unadulterated democracy trumps individual rights. Now, of course, the other side of this cultural argument or this cultural divide is a more American idea. And in America, you don't get that kind of collective utility as a value of individuals, but you get the Bill of Rights. You get things like that. You get arguments about, the argument about whether including the Bill of Rights for the founding fathers was not, do people have these rights? It was agreed that these rights existed a priori to the state, and the state's job was to protect them. And the argument was like, well, if we only enumerate these rights, people might think those are the only ones they have, but obviously they have lots more. And that was the argument. So, and it's not a bill of entitlements from the state, right? It's a list of prohibitions on what the collective can do to you. No matter what they vote for, they can't pass a law to limit your freedom of speech. That's what that means. No matter what they vote for, they're not allowed to limit your rights to bear arms, right? The Bill of Rights is explicitly anti-democratic. It's an anti-democratic set of amendments to the Constitution designed to limit the effects of democracy, because democracy, of course, isn't the goal. The will of the people isn't the goal. Individual sovereignty is the goal, as opposed to this collective utility, right? And I'm sure many of you know the founding fathers were very concerned about the United States devolving into a tyranny of democracy. Okay, so that's the third aspect of the culture, where the fourth one is really a disagreement over the nature of truth. On the one side, you have kind of a social epistemology, and and the other side you have reason. And I know that the side that argues for social epistemology, they talk about the science a lot, but it's not science, right? And that there's a distinction there. They feel the need to use the language to get legitimacy, but they're not talking about actual reason. And so if you look at this is, you see this again in both the Marxists and the Nazis. This is this idea that truth is what the group or the authority representing the group says it is, and dissent is not tolerated here. So obviously both the Soviets and the Nazis were obsessed with censorship and controlling information. You had state-run media on the Soviet side. Stalin, one of the very common or infamous quotes from Stalin is ideas are more powerful than guns. We would not let our enemies have guns. Why should we let them have ideas? Right? That was his view of how thought and speech should be controlled. Obviously, the Nazis they built cartels of media and entertainment. They were state-controlled cartels. They held book burnings. Those book burnings, by the way, were culturally supported. It's for students that burned the books, not politicians. Hitler didn't say, like, go burn some books. It was students in universities that decided that was a good idea, because that was their philosophy on the nature of truth was this social epistemology. Anything that goes against what we're being told, what the consensus is, needs to be eradicated. And ultimately, obviously, that includes people who go against the consensus. On the other side of that is basically just reason, right? Where in America you have things like the freedom of speech, freedom of press. In America, dissent is allowed, and this is based on the concept that people, reasoning is an individual capacity. Mobs don't reason. A state doesn't reason. Only an individual mind reasons. And America's founded on this idea, this concept that people decide the truth for themselves. They have a reasoning mind. It's theirs to use. And therefore, we need to let speech be unregulated, leave press alone, and let people reason on their own. But there's also this belief within America that the mob is not omniscient. And just the will of the mob, which under an epistemological system of social epistemology, the will of the mob would be kind of by default truth. That's what would be considered truth. Well, this is what the mob says, and the representatives of the mob speak for the mob or whatever. Therefore, it's true. Obviously, in America, they were very concerned about democracy, and they established a particular type of democracy, a constitutional republic. And this system was a means to an end. It was not, the idea wasn't like, oh, democracy is the thing that we need. That's the value. The value is democracy. No, the value was protecting individual rights. And the goal was to come up with a governmental system that would maximize the protection of individual rights. And in the view of the founding fathers, that was a highly restrained form of democracy, a constitutional republic with lots of rules around it that would restrain what the will of the people could do. All right. The next aspect of the culture war here is in the realm of the nature of human relations. And this is what I'm saying is zero sum versus win-win. On the left, you've got this idea that, look, there's finite resources. Therefore, whenever you acquire something, you do so at my expense. This is what leads to the Marxist idea of seizing the means of production, outlawing private trade, right? You get left with force being used to take and redistribute assets. You get force being used to prevent the accumulation of wealth. It's this idea that, again, where did the factory come from? Marxists don't have an answer for this. Where did the factory come from? I don't know. It was just there. We need to seize it, right? It's this confusion of the metaphysical with the man-made. It's just there. There's no recognition that value actually comes from the product of human minds. The factory was just a pile of rubble. It was human minds and ingenuity that figured out how to build the factory and that's how the factory existed, and everyone is better off for it, right? Nazis had the same ideology. I mean, economically, they were Marxist. I mean, they agreed with the economics of Marx, at least. They killed a lot of the small businesses, so they wanted larger businesses that they could manage. Ownership was kind of nominal; it wasn't real. There's complete control by the state over the means of production, basic prices, what to produce, when to produce it, what to pay people, like all that. The state controlled all of that. So same deal. And the results of both the Marxist and Nazi systems here, this idea of a zero-sum relationship between humans, means that if you don't have a win-win, if you don't have mutual benefit, if that's not possible, then everything becomes a contest for which force is kind of justified in their mind. Like, well, if mutual benefit's not going to happen, then whatever you have is at my expense, so I need to beat you over the head in order to take it, right? So it's used to legitimize the use of force. And the Soviets, well, both the Soviets and the Nazis used this on their own citizens, obviously quite a lot. And they both also used it outside of their countries with military expansion. The Nazi may be more overt often than the Soviets were in supporting Soviet regimes elsewhere, but a little bit the Soviets as well. They both used force unabashedly as their means to redistribute. Now, the flip side of that culture war is, hey, and by the way, maybe we should quickly mention, in the U.S., when we're talking about the progressives, that's how they view economics. You can see that's how they view economics all the time, right? It's this idea that, well, I was going to pick on I'm going to pick on Bezos. Just put all of your other dislike of Bezos aside for a moment. But they look at someone like Bezos and they say, well, he has money at my expense. Well, that's not true. I mean, except for to the extent that he's in bed with the government. He's not money at your expense, right? When someone's successful, they make $1, right? There's this phrase in American culture, to make money. They make $1 because they create value. They either build a marketplace where none existed, or invent something new and sell it where none existed. And it's to everyone's mutual benefit. And you only buy the iPhone if you think the value of the iPhone is worth more to you than the dollars that you're taking out of your wallet and handing to the Apple store. That's how that works. So there's this understanding in America. Again, it's not fully vetted out in American culture. A lot of this stuff is, there's none of it's perfect, and none of it's been implemented perfectly. But there's this idea that you can have a win-win. You can trade both interpersonally and internationally. Countries can trade, people can trade, and it can be win-win. There's no need to be fighting over the last piece of pizza, right? That's not how kind of the core of the American economic system and that principle works. Okay, so those are the first kind of 5 elements of the culture war, as far as I can tell. Again, maybe I'm leaving something out. And the 6th one is really about the political result. The political result of adopting these ideas is you either want let's see if I can point correctly, an administrative state, or you want something more like classical liberalism, right? On the administrative state side, these are the progressives. This is this idea that you are basically a farm animal that the administrative state centrally manages. Soviets, Nazis, Chinese, you're all owned, right? That's the idea. In fact, if you want to pick on one idea that separates America from basically all the countries prior in history, it's the idea that you're not owned by the state. You're not a serf. You're not a servant of the state. You're not the king's property. You're not the administrative state's property. You are not owned. You have that individual sovereignty, which is expressed in America as kind of what I'll call classical liberalism, right? This idea that you manage your own affairs. The purpose of the state is simply to guarantee your individual sovereignty, prohibit the initiation of force, against you from either your neighbors or from, outside. That's the idea of America. This more classical liberalism. You manage your own affairs. You're not livestock. You're not livestock in service of something bigger. But of course, for the progressives, that's exactly what you are. So the progressives in the U.S., they exemplify, all of these things. This is the left column of that list I was showing you. The progressives exemplify all of these, no less than the Soviets or the Chinese or the Nazis did, right? They have the intersectional fatalism, they have the social justice, they have the collective utility, they have the social epistemology, they believe in the zero-sum economically, and they support an administrative state. That's the origins of progressivism itself is about experts building an administrative state to rule us. And I think probably their first big champion politically was Woodrow Wilson, which is the worst president probably in the history of America, who gave us lots of horrible things like the income tax, Federal Reserve, and that kind of stuff. So, and this was, he laid the groundwork for building the apparatus of the administrative state. So that's where we are. So that's kind of how I think about the culture war, I guess is what I'll say. Now, the status, where are we right now with the culture war? Okay. I hope this isn't too much of a black pill, because ultimately I'm optimistic about the ideas succeeding, just maybe not in Washington. Look, historically, these ideas, that list of, here, this list of 6, right? Those things historically were infused into a single human being that represented them, right? Ideologues sold the ideas, right? And let's just look at the 3 examples I've already used. Stalin was, he didn't rise up through some apparatus. He was he was a revolutionary. He was a political leader. He was a revolutionary. He helped protect Lenin during the Russian Revolution in 1917. I mean, there was some, butting of the heads at the beginning and actually later on as well. But he eventually joined Stalin. He protected Lenin in the Russian Revolution and hid him and stuff. He was a key figure in the Russian Revolution in 1917. He was a leader. And he embodied these ideas personally, right? Mao led communist China, led the communist revolution in China. He embodied the communist ideal in China. So these ideas were wrapped together with people. Hitler, it's hard to analyze him. He was an ideologue. He wasn't just a power luster. Right. So one important, I would argue Hitler falls into this category. The only thing you can't do is prove it, because when he was gone because the war ended. So things changed. But Hitler was not just a power luster who didn't have a vision and ideology. If he just wanted power, he could have done what most people do. If you wanted power in the U.S., for example, you would join the Republican or Democratic parties and work your way up, maybe get to be a senator, and then eventually get to be elected president of the United States. That was Biden's path. That's most people's path, right? Maybe Trump's an exception, but that's most people's path. Now, but even Trump joined the Republican Party, right? That wasn't Hitler's path. The Nazi Party was founded by Anton Drexler in 1919, not even in the center of power, which was Berlin. It was founded outside the mainstream in Munich. There was no hope of anything ever really happening. Hitler, I think, joined in 1920 or something. He went there. There was little chance of success. You couldn't imagine, right, that 15 years later, these people would be in power. But the ideology was clear from the start. They were dedicated to the ideology. They were explicit about the ideology. They were explicit about authoritarianism being a necessary step towards their, fantasy goals and all this kind of stuff. This was an ideologue who embodied all these ideas. And the MO, the modus operandi for political change for most of the 20th century has been along those lines. You start a political movement with charismatic leadership, right? And that's kind of how you push your ideas through. And the problem is there's a practical problem here. And again, I can't say that this would have happened with Hitler because we don't know that he was, the war defeated Nazism, so it was an external force. But if you look at Stalin and Mao, for example, when Stalin died, so did, like, it wasn't an immediate death, but so did that Soviet ideology. Khrushchev was much more mild. He did like an anti-Stalinization, right? Khrushchev was much more mild than Stalin. And then obviously Gorbachev, even more mild, who eventually helped break the Soviet Union. Now, that wasn't really his goal, but turned the Soviet Union into not a communist dictatorship anymore. He wanted more kind of democratic system. So when the person intertwined with these ideas fails or dies or whatever, they kind of go away. Same thing happened in China. Mao was communist. When he died, Deng Xiaoping, who had actually been kind of an outsider, had been excommunicated. Deng Xiaoping came in and was kind of like, well, we need socialism with Chinese characteristics. We need to reinvent this, right? And basically, yeah, they're still authoritarian, but they're not communist anymore. They're an authoritarian tax farm. But those ideas, those ideals of communism didn't last once Mao died. So there's a practical problem if you're on the left and you've got your ideals, your philosophical ideals here: intersectional fatalism, social justice, collective utility, social epistemology, zero sum, and administrative state. If that's your grand plan, you've got some particular implementation of that plan. If you intertwine those ideas with a leader, when the leader fails or the leader dies, you lose. Now, progressives in the U.S. solved this problem. Yeah, some did start political parties that ended up going nowhere, right? But they successfully played the long game. And the long game was to capture the culture, capture the philosophy, get those ideas embedded in the culture philosophically, get those ideas in there first, learn how to manipulate the public, and then go for political power, not through an outside entity, but through mainstream, one of the big two parties, actually both in some ways, right? So they instead of having an outsider come in with this vision and painting this vision and rallying the people behind it, which maybe just wouldn't have worked in America, what they did instead was undermine the American culture. Yuri Bezmenov called that ideological subversion, right? They undermined the American culture. They implanted these ideas into our culture, and then they could make a political move. And they slowly were making political moves the whole time. But like really the political power move needs to come after it's embedded in culture. Now, the downside with that strategy is it takes forever. The benefit is that the ideal, these philosophic ideas become institutionalized and normalized in society. So the leaders that spout them are puppets, either consciously or unconsciously, right? They're just going along with the accepted ideas. If the leader fails, the ideology persists, right? In no way is Joe Biden progressivism, right? If Joe Biden, goes away tomorrow, progressivism doesn't die. Kamala Harris isn't progressivism. Bernie Sanders isn't. Gavin Newsom isn't. Obama wasn't. Elizabeth Warren isn't. Even the Squad isn't progressivism. They're just puppets of progressivism. They're just following the ideology, and that ideology is already established, well established. Right. And progressives did this. This was their strategy, and they did it. They pulled it off. They have captured our institutions. This was the long march, right? They have a stronghold in our institutions. That phrase, the long march into the institutions, was coined in 1967 by a communist activist, Rudi Deutschka. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He was a spokesman of the German student movement, by the way. So lots of bad ideas always coming out of Germany. But he was a communist spokesman for the German student movement. He coined this idea, this phrase of long march into institutions in the U.S. And look, here we are. Like that was 55 years ago, right? That was 55 years ago. It took a long time. But now we've got universities, primary schools, secondary schools, Hollywood, journalism, generally mainstream media, large corporations, NGOs, the entire apparatus of the state, all the bureaucrats, they're owned. They're absolutely owned by these progressive ideas. This is their moral standard. They've adopted the progressive moral standard. So now it's time for them to solidify that political power, because that they have a slightly more tenuous hold on political power in terms of elected officials. I think they thought it was in the bag. Trump obviously scared the hell out of them, because they owned all the institutions, and along came this guy who was not on board with these values. And it doesn't matter what values he was on board with, he wasn't on board with those. And obviously they're making sure they're doing their damnedest to make sure he can't run again. And the main opposition they've gotten, I think, philosophically, if you can even call it that, is from people who at least are nominally pro-liberty. They might not, I would call it maybe the spirit of liberty. A lot of people aren't able to define or what they mean by that. It's partly because they just don't think in abstract terms. They've been taught not to think in these terms. They don't really know what they mean by liberty. But and a disturbing percentage probably think it means freedom to get Social Security benefits or whatever. But they have a visceral feeling like this. I want liberty, and I feel like I'm not getting. Like I feel like something's wrong, and they're right. Something is wrong, and that's kind of the main opposition. That's why you end up with, there's a lot not to like about Trump, but the reason I think that a lot of people were behind him is this. He was kind of like, yeah, something's wrong here. We need to dismantle this crap. And that resonated with people. All right. So unlike the authoritarians in the past, Mao, Stalin, Hitler, for the Democrats right now, for the progressives, there's no need for them to oppose democracy. They don't need to do that. In fact, it's against their best interest too. They've captured the culture. They know how to manipulate the masses. They've captured the culture. Not to mention that they actually own the bureaucracy that counts votes and all the institutions that report on it, basically. So if that's your case, if you kind of fought this 55-year-long battle and you kind of own the values of culture and these institutions, you kind of want democracy. But what you want is unfettered, unrestrained democracy, because there's a constitution standing in your way that's meant to limit it. And that's a problem for you. And so all that's left, really, I think, for the progressives to do is to intellectually or maybe emotionally disarm the pro-liberty spirit in Americans. And this is, these are people who actually like the founding fathers, at least nominally, right? Which is not people on the left, right? People on the left explicitly hate the founding fathers, as we've seen. Unfortunately, for people like Biden or the progressives behind him, their understanding of liberty is really, really vague. So, hey, some word salad in a speech just might work. I already mentioned, notice the need to use principled language here in the speech. We're going to look at the speech now. Notice the need to use principled language. Ask yourself why. Right? Because he's not being principled. The reason to use that language is to usurp the principles. He's trying to usurp that spirit of liberty. He's trying to commandeer it for his agenda, because they're not sure what it means. So if he can conflate it with some other stuff and move the conversation elsewhere and make you feel like, if he can get you to associate his agenda viscerally with liberty and the founding fathers, he can kind of undermine this opposition. So, yeah. With that said, I'm going to look at chat before I start the video. Someone suggests we rename the statue to the Statue of Equity. Yeah, well, they don't need to, because they'll just redefine. Also, this person asks what's to be done. Well, let's have that conversation later. But let's take a look at this. I'm going to pull this up.
My fellow.
All right, before we start, and I didn't want to start quite yet. Before we start, I just want you to look at the aesthetics of this for a minute. In fact, I'll just pull ahead because they're better, like right in the middle here. Right, look at these aesthetics. Look at this. Now, I should find the fist pumping. He's got some spots with the fist. The aesthetics are even better. But the background here. So this is an authoritarian aesthetic by anyone's definition. I mean, it's almost it's bizarre, right? The background here is red. It's dark. There's two Marines who are kind of motionless and stoic. There's silhouettes practically. There's no one else in the background. No coalitions or anything else. Just those two figures, authority, like figures of violence, by the way, representing violence, representing authority, like the authority of the state and their ability to wield guns. There's no one else in the foreground or background, as I mentioned. In the foreground, there's just kind of this. The camera angle never really changes. It's straight on. He's kind of in a spotlight almost. There's no camera angle changes whatsoever. It's just straight on. There he is. This is reminiscent to me of Leni Riefenstahl. Leni Riefenstahl was the film producer for Triumph of the Will and some other Nazi propaganda. She was generally recognized as, I think she would be much more recognized as a film genius if she hadn't worked with the Nazis, so that she's kind of a controversial figure in the film world, but she is recognized as having a talent aesthetically, right? So she, it reminds me of kind of that kind of propagandistic setup. It also reminds me of V for Vendetta, the Chancellor Adam Sutler kind of aesthetic there. It also kind of reminds me of 1984 a little bit, and maybe even Emperor or whatever is it Emperor Palpatine or Chancellor Palpatine or whatever. And I did, by the way, if you want to vote, I put a little poll up you can vote for what his aesthetics reminded you of, and 2% of you said he reminded you of the founding fathers. So mission accomplished, Joe Biden. So anyway, that's the aesthetic here. I think the question is, why is this the aesthetic? This was not unintentional. Well, he's planning to vilify his enemies here, so it's kind of a sinister message. So there's a little bit of that. But I think he is about to boldly position himself as the defender of liberty, which is such a huge lie. It's such a huge lie that you really have to sell this. You've got to look like you're damn sure yourself. So he is selling this as like, we're at war with these people and I'm on the side of liberty and the founding fathers. Like, this is, he's got to go over the top in selling this here. So I think, other than just, oops, we're authoritarians and we let our aesthetics slip, I think some of that was intentional, right? Now, the context here is he is at Independence Hall. So obviously this links all of his rhetoric to the principles of the founding fathers. It also links it to this idea that now's the time to fight for America, right? This is, the founding of the country was a tumultuous time. There was a lot of standing up on principle and fighting, actually bloodshed, to do this. So he's kind of linking it to the urgency. It's crisis time, and he's on the side of the founding fathers. That's the reason for this location. The timing, I think, is a little bit obvious, right? The midterm elections around the corner. They've been there's all this Trump FBI drama in the news. They really want to make sure that Trump can't run again, and they're trying to paint the brush larger than Trump now. You'll see him talk about the word. You'll hear him use the word MAGA Republicans. I'm sure he means DeSantis and anyone else that might be endorsed by or sympathetic to in any way Trump. And again, this is because they are paranoid of a Trump resurgence coming up in this election. I think this is a bad strategic move, but I'm not a political strategist. I think if they had just ignored Trump completely, he would have gone away. He'd have retired. He'd have, once in a while, he'd have been on CBS News or whatever and talking about stuff, but no one would care. But because they can't help but go after him because they're so paranoid of him, it's really rallied a lot of people who would not otherwise be considering themselves defenders of Trump. They've got a lot of people rallying behind him in a way that I don't think would have happened. But they want to. I think one argument you could make here is they're going to try and. It's hard to make this. I could be wrong about this, but they might be trying to link liberty to Trump and then defeating Trump, which will also ultimately defeat liberty. Although Biden does try and usurp the word liberty himself here as well. So I don't know. Let's go through the speech. Let's start from the beginning here and go through the speech. Remember as we do this, his speech is uncorrelated to the truth. So don't what's he trying to say? What's the truth he's getting at? It's not correlated to the truth. If anything, it's anti-correlated to the truth. You would do better assuming that the truth is the opposite of everything he says, that everything's a projection. That's probably a better assumption. I wouldn't say do either one of those things blanketly, but remember, it's not correlated or anti-correlated to the truth. And the reason for that is the purpose here is not to communicate information. It's to manipulate and deceive people. The audience for this speech is clearly really more his ideological opponents or the ideological opponents of progressivism. It's a mainstream audience that is his audience here. He's not speaking to the squad. He's not speaking to progressives. He is speaking to the mainstream people that he's afraid might be going, hey, there's something. We are kind of losing liberties, right? Like they might be listening to some of the rhetoric from we'll say the MAGA Republicans, as he would say, and their curiosity is piqued, and they're like, it does feel like something's wrong. It just does feel like we're losing our liberties. Those are the people he's speaking to. So here we go. I'm going to pause it a lot, probably.
Please, if you have a seat, take it. I speak to you tonight from sacred ground in America, Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
All right. Again, this venue is intentional. He is saying he's calling it sacred ground because he wants to convince you that he loves America's founding also. Just like you. He's one of you. He loves America's founding. It's sacred ground to him. Okay?
This is where America made its Declaration of Independence to the world more than 2 centuries ago with an idea unique among nations, that in America, we're all created equal. This is where the United States Constitution was written and debated. This is where we set in motion the most extraordinary experiment of self-government the world has ever known. With 3 simple words: we the people. We the people.
Okay, I'm just going to pause here again. He's evoking some imagery here, saying, I'm an admirer of the founding principles also. That's part of the imagery he's evoking, clearly. But he's drawing attention to we the people, which I stopped and I wondered, why are you doing that? That's not the focus. I mean, yes, those are the first 3 words, but it's not really the heart of anything. It's not really the focus. That's not the we the people isn't the principle behind the Constitution. I think maybe that it's that his authority because he wants to argue that his authority flows from his status as a representative of the people, and I can't help but think of there's not a better way to put it really than this line from you ever watch Monty Python's Holy Grail? There's a scene in the beginning where the king is arguing with the peasant, and the peasant says to the king, supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony. And we laugh at it. It's a funny line. Fine. But people actually believe that first part, that supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses. That's extremely dangerous. That's the dictatorship of the proletariat. This idea that what the masses will, their mandate, you as their representative get to wield supreme executive power. And I think that's what he's trying to go for. He's the representative of we the people. Therefore, because the Constitution is just based on we the people, you'll see that later. Therefore, he should have supreme executive power. All right, let's keep going.
These two documents and the ideas they embody, equality and democracy, are the rock upon which this nation is built. They're how we became the greatest nation on earth. They're why, for more than 2 centuries, America has been a beacon to the world.
Okay, so that's just false. Equality. So, okay, first of all, equality. They use equality and equity often interchangeably. And my argument for that is they argue that when is a disparate outcomes, that must mean there's inequality, right? That's how they use it, inequality. What was meant by equality, obviously, by the founding fathers, was equality under the law. So he says these two documents and the ideas they embody. Now he's essentializing these documents, which is fine. But the ideas he's essentializing it to are equality, which he doesn't really mean in the way they did, and democracy, which they were terrified of. And he says these are the rock upon which the nation's built. They're how we became the greatest nation. No. Now, equality under the law was important, but democracy was viewed as a means to an end, as I've said before. So it was liberty. It's the political liberty afforded by having a system designed to protect individual rights. That's why we became a beacon to the world. That's why we became the greatest nation on earth. It's because we had liberty as a result of the individual rights that were recognized in these documents, which, by the way, were necessarily limitations on democracy. That's what made America special. And this is an old trick, and it works. I've seen it my entire life with politicians. It sickens me, but it's this idea that America equals democracy, right? America equals democracy. And you hear presidents say, we want to spread democracy around the world. No. Democracy is merely a means to an end. It is not what makes America special. It never has. If there was a different means that accomplished the end better, that would be a better thing to do. Right now, the founding fathers couldn't come up with anything better than a constitutional republic and some variant on democracy that was limited, right? Intentionally limited. There's still an electoral college. Keep in mind, when the Constitution was written, senators were appointed by states, right? Not voted for by people. So, like, there was intentional limitations because they wanted to make sure that that individual rights were respected, and they wanted to stop the tyranny of democracy. But politicians do this all the time. They conflate America with democracy, and they say, therefore, stop opposing things that arise through the democratic process. If people voted for it, stop opposing it, because America is democracy, which it's not. Democracy is a broad category that includes many systems of government. America does have a democratic system of government, but it's not a pure democracy, and it's intentionally limited. So, it's just important. And by the way, as far as being a beacon to the world, that is true. America has been a beacon to the world. But here's an anecdote about when people actually get to America after having seen what America was in the past. I had a friend, 20 years ago, who she grew up in Kenya. She grew up reading about individual rights and how awesome. She read founding documents and that kind of stuff, right? And she was like, oh, "This is great. America is this land of liberty." And she came here, and she was granted, she moved to California, but she was horribly depressed because she was like, well, it's not any of those things at all. It's a democracy. It's kind of free, but it's not really different than most of Europe. And so America's being an example is not dependent on its democratic system of government. It's dependent on its recognition of individual rights and the value of liberty. Okay, if I stop this much all the time, we're never going to get through this. So let's keep going.
But as I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault. We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise.
Really quickly, because he's linked equality and democracy to America, so now he's saying America is under assault. And the tone that he's going to take, the direction he's going to go here is, we're the Americans, and our opposition is anti-American, which I'm going to just put this distinction in your head now so you can be thinking about it. He is swapping out what it means to be American versus what it means to be a supporter of the American bureaucratic state. And those are two, in fact, not only are they two different things, they have grown to become two things that oppose each other. All right, let's keep going.
So tonight, I've come to this place where it all began to speak as plainly as I can to the nation about the threats we face, about the power we have in our own hands to meet these threats, and about the incredible future that lies in front of us if only we choose it.
I don't have proof of this, but I think when he says the power that, quote, we have in our own hands, obviously he represents we in this. I think he's priming us somehow for increased government exercise of power. And I see it again later in the speech, which we'll talk about. But I have a suspicion that he's priming us. He wants to do something that will be controversial, and he is priming us for this, which is why he needs to make this into a crisis, because we let people get away with stuff when it's a crisis.
We must never forget, we the people are the true heirs of the American experiment that began more than 2 centuries ago.
Again, this is kind of a weird phrase, because I think he's setting it up for an us versus them kind of thing, right? If he means we the people, the true heirs, that means literally everyone, but he's excluding some people. So when he says we never forget that we're the true heirs, we the people are the true heirs, he's starting to paint we the people as opposed to someone else. Those some other people will be MAGA Republicans. They're not we the people. We're we the people. That's going to be his. That's going to be the tone here.
We the people have burning inside of each of us the flame of liberty that was lit here at Independence Hall. A flame that lit our way through abolition, the Civil War, suffrage, the Great Depression, world wars, civil rights. That sacred flame still burns. Now in our time, as we build an America that is more prosperous, free, and just. That is the work of my presidency, a mission I believe in with my whole soul.
Okay, so clearly here he's using the language that pro-liberty people would use, right? The flames of liberty burning, blah, blah, blah. You could argue that some of the events he cited, Great Depression, for example, we abandoned, the flame of liberty didn't see us through that. We kind of extinguished it and implemented the New Deal. But we weren't following it. So you could make some arguments there. But he's generally using this language, this pro-liberty language here. And he's also telling us that we have liberty now. It's still burning now. It burns now in our time, he says. So he's kind of saying, like, yeah, we still have it, and we recognize that you all have this flame of liberty that burns, and hey, we still all have it. We're still on the same side. I'm the pro-liberty one. It's in my soul. God damn it. It's a mission I believe with my whole soul. right? That's what he's saying. I am the pro-liberty one. If you can believe that.
But first, we must be honest with each other and with ourselves. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal.
Okay, just as a reminder, when he says we must be honest with each other and ourselves, what he means is I'm going to lie to you now. Right? I got to be honest, that when it comes out of almost any politician's mouth, it's I'm going to lie. But we know he's lying because he's not a defender of liberty. I mean, was that his campaign? Did he talk about the flame of liberty? No. In fact, normally if you use that language during a campaign, you're a crazy libertarian or maybe someone who's a decent Republican, but like not Democrats don't use that language, right? So he's lying to you. I got to be honest. He's about to lie to you. And also he's like, what's happening in our country isn't normal. Well, normal is kind of a vague thing. And it's also a status quo bias. And like we've talked about in the past, claiming it like normalizing stuff that's bad. Like they've normalized, we talked about this, right? They normalize these progressive values, right? And then they say, hey, what's happening now is abnormal. Yeah, so what? Yeah, it is abnormal. It needs to be abnormal because normal has gotten to be a problem. So, all right, let's keep going.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Okay, I've said this before. Extremism is a non-argument word. I can't stand it. It's based on the fallacy of the Aristotelian mean. It's a use of pragmatic language for people who cannot think philosophically. And of course, they don't want you thinking philosophically. They don't want you thinking in philosophical terms. And so they say, well, I'm against extremism, or extremism is bad. Extremism is just a degree. Like extremely good isn't bad. Extremely just isn't bad. So extremism doesn't mean anything. It means like what's extreme about it? What is being extreme, right? And it's based on this. It's used to paint something as evil without having to defend why you think it's evil, and it's also based on the pragmatic philosophy that the left has been using to erode our liberty for generations. And that is, well, you want pure liberty. That's extreme. Just take a little bit, just compromise a little bit on some socialism. Just a little bit of government ownership of you, right? And obviously, the conservatives suck at saying no, so they say sure, and they brag like, hey, they wanted to increase the budget by 10%, but we only increased it by 5%. That's a win. Well, and it would be extreme to say we should reduce the budget. That's extremism, right? So, this is how they slowly take baby steps forward and forward and forward continuously. You're constantly compromising because they're the only ones that stand on principle, by the way. They're evil principles, but they make principled arguments. And they can make those principled arguments because they've convinced everyone of the principles that work for what they want. So they make those principled arguments in public, and the right looks like, pandy-waisted weaklings. So, and he says here, this extremism threatens the foundation. What he means is it threatens the method. It threatens democracy. It threatens the method. He doesn't like the method being threatened. And again, he's mentioning Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans because they're terrified. All right, let's move on.
Now, I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans.
Okay, this is clever. Well, it's not super clever. But what he's doing is he's giving Republicans an out. He's saying you're gonna come away with the speech thinking, okay, these MAGA Republicans are an existential threat. But now's your chance to say you're not a MAGA Republican. There are Republicans who aren't the MAGA Republicans. So, and it's not all of them. Now, in reality, it actually is. I mean, Trump received 47 million votes, which was the most in history, except for Biden's 81 million, assuming vote counts are all, kosher. So it's quite a lot of people who are MAGA Republicans. But he is pretending like it's a small set of them. He's painting them as a small set so that he can convince the people who are kind of leaning that way that, like, oh, we're gonna vilify this group over here. Be sure you're on my side. So he's giving them an out. He's giving them an out.
But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country. These are hard things.
All right. So, again, giving them a little bit of an out. They're even intimidated by Donald Trump. The Republican Party is dominated, but I know not all you Republicans. It's just the party, and you're all intimidated. He's a threat, right? He's about to tell us how, I guess, or he should. He doesn't actually really. He touches on some stuff, but he's supposed to tell us how he's a threat. By the way, these are hard things is a weird line. I remember hearing that, and I'm like, what does he mean? In the word salad, these are hard things is kind of like a crouton. It's just kind of a tasteless, crunchy thing. I don't know what it means. These are hard things. All right, Joe. Maybe he means reading from the teleprompter is a hard thing. I don't know.
But I'm an American president, not a president of red America, blue America, but of all America. And I believe it's my duty to level with you, to tell the truth, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful. Again,
just his recommendation, assume the opposite here. So when he says he's not the president of red or blue America, but all America, he's the president of unity. What he means is, I'm here to divide you and be partisan, which is very clear from his speech. It's very hard to make an argument that he's actually unifying in his speech. When he says, I'm here to be honest, level with you, to tell you the truth, he means lie to you. And actually, I'm wondering if he mean, it's very painful. Maybe he actually likes it. I don't know. All right, here, let's see what he has to say about the damn MAGA Republicans.
And here, in my view, is what is true. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard that right. Joe Biden is criticizing someone for not respecting the Constitution. Now, obviously, this is a complete usurpation of the concept of respecting the Constitution. I mean, obviously, his opponents, most of them view themselves as constitutionalists. The left, I mean, they use the Constitution as toilet paper. They don't give one iota about the Constitution. They'll read anything they want into the Constitution for any purpose they want. The left is. This is why they talk about democracy, not the limits. I mean, is he going to talk? If he's going to talk about the Constitution, is he going to talk about the limits the Constitution places on democracy? No. So I mean, this is rich. This is rich. He respects or he's not saying he respects it. He's saying they don't respect it, which is like, yeah, thanks. I'm surprised he got away with that, but I guess I shouldn't be. He also talks about the rule of law here. They don't believe in the rule of law. I think maybe you could ask yourself, is it true that the MAGA Republicans don't believe in the rule of law? Or do they not believe in maybe certain laws? Maybe they don't believe in some of the laws. Like if you make a law that's immoral, maybe I wouldn't believe in it. Or maybe they think that they are being ruled by men and not laws. Maybe they think laws are being selectively applied based on ideological compliance, which is not the rule of law at all. Maybe they do believe in the rule of law and they think the rule of law is not what's happening. Also, by the way, in the same breath, he says they don't respect the Constitution, and then he says they don't recognize the will of the people. Well, the Constitution is not the will of the people. It's restrictions on the will of the people. Again, one of the most fundamental things about the Constitution. I mean, remember growing up how much you were told about the Bill of Rights? Don't worry. These are things they can't do. Those are restrictions on the will of the people. That's what they are. But again, he's pretending that the Constitution, he's using the Constitution because most people listening to this have no idea what the Constitution means. They've never read the Constitution. They've never even read the Cliff Notes of the Constitution. They have no clue. So if he says the Constitution is just about whatever the will of the people wants, the president gets all that power and that's what the Constitution says, like, okay, whatever. If that's what he says it means, they'll buy it for the most part. All right.
They refuse to accept the results of a free election, and they're working right now, as I speak, in state after state, to give power to decide elections in America to partisans and cronies, empowering election deniers to undermine democracy itself.
I mean, he's really leading us to believe that we're in some kind of unique crisis here, that this is not, normal life in the uniparty world, like that there isn't district gerrymandering and all this kind of stuff and partisans and cronies. He's acting like this is not normal behavior. But Congress has a pretty low approval rating. The government has a pretty low approval rating. I would say people know that a lot of this is kind of standard behavior, and there's not some unusual crisis here. But we're led to believe that. Now, I just want to remind you, he says they refuse to accept the results of a free election. I don't have the videos here, but you can find them online. They're all over the place. Look, after Trump won in 2016, the Democrats did the exact same thing. I mean, they didn't have their January 6th moment, but Hillary ran around saying he's an illegitimate president. She said that the 2016 election was not on the level. Those are her words. She also said that it was stolen from her. Her words. Her words. He's an illegitimate president. The election was stolen from her. That's Hillary Clinton. And lots of people on her side went around repeating that kind of crap, saying that democracy was threatened and blah blah blah. Like, why? Because they lost. Now, I also want to address this concept of election denier. Let's put aside the actual election results, partly because I don't want to get the YouTube strike, partly because I think it's complex to see. But put aside the results for a second. It clearly wasn't administered impartially by the progressive apparatus, right? That they've already captured. I mentioned what the progressives have captured: mainstream media, in various institutions and bureaucracies, like big tech, right? That progressive apparatus, it's been captured by the progressives. The election was in no way impartial. I mean, the entire cathedral suppressed Biden damaging information, and they elevated Trump damaging information. We heard years of Russia, right? But we didn't really hear a lot about Biden in Ukraine. We didn't hear about the Hunter Biden laptop. It was, in fact, suppressed intentionally. We heard, Sam Harris, like that we heard him comment on that. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. And we heard that Trump derangement syndrome. That was typical of, he might sound crazy, but he's representative of the attitudes of that entire cathedral of progressivism, that entire apparatus, the media and everything, and big tech, right? And we saw recently on Joe Rogan We saw Zuckerberg admit, well, the FBI kind of told us to be on the lookout for things like the Hunter Biden. They didn't say Hunter Biden specifically. He doesn't think, he couched what he said a little bit, but clearly the FBI is kind of at least hinting that they shouldn't be talking about the Hunter Biden laptop story. We know it got suppressed by Twitter. We know it got suppressed by the New York Post got suspended by Twitter. Facebook admitted suppressing it. So, you can call them election deniers all you want, but the truth is, it's undeniable that the coverage of the election, which we know does have an effect on elections. Facebook, as one example, has tested this. They know it has a result, and they know it has an effect. It was certainly anything but objective. So you don't have to deny the machinations of voting machines or anything else. You can say this was totally a manipulated result based on the behavior of mainstream media and big tech alone. And I think that's a hard statement to argue against. So, and blah, blah, blah. They undermine democracy, blah, blah, which, by the way, the Constitution undermines democracy intentionally or limits it. So, okay, here we go. Let's listen to some more.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love.
Okay, so I probably shouldn't. If I stop like this and go into every little detail, it's going to take forever. But look, he's conflating things like rights, like right to privacy, with entitlements, like right to contraception. Like you don't have a right to I guess you have a right to buy contraception, right? Maybe that's what he's talking about. But I don't know what this right to privacy stuff is. Is it coming from the Roe? It's coming from the Roe. I know it's coming from the overturning of Roe because that's what Roe rests on. But I mean, how about hey, if we have a right to privacy, how about pardoning Edward Snowden and discussing the massive surveillance state? Thanks for standing up for our individual rights, Joe Biden. I love how much you often talk about the unconstitutionality of the National Security Agency and the entire surveillance state that we've set up. I really appreciate how much you've been fighting against those and how you've really fought. And how much I like that you pardoned Edward Snowden. Thank you so much, you pillar of individual rights. And you noble defender of individual rights, Joe Biden, you.
They promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country.
Okay, first of all, they promote authoritarian leaders. That's mostly projection. Obviously, you can't name a whole bunch of stuff that Trump did that was, more authoritarian than anyone else, unless you want to claim that there was an insurrection on January 6th, which obviously I think is hyperbolic to say the least. But keep in mind also that because the progressives have captured the institutions, and because I talked about how they no longer need to have their ideas intertwined with a particular political figure, they don't really need an authoritarian. They can have a cabal running things and you get the same result. I don't care whether I'm oppressed by a committee or a person. It's the same thing. And by the way, they fan the flames of political violence. This is from the people, the same people that Antifa is just an idea. Have you ever heard of Antifa? It's like we totally forgot about 2 years ago. Yeah, it's only MAGA Republicans that fan the flames of political violence. A threat to our personal rights. Well, I mean, it seems like the left is a threat to our personal rights with respect to free speech and what they're telling big tech to be doing and working with big tech to do. And with respect to the Second Amendment, by the way, Mr. Constitution, firearms. Do we have do we have any economic rights anymore, or is it just whatever. The rule of law, I mean, what they're a threat to is compliance with unaccountable bureaucrats and their orders. That's what the MAGA Republicans are a threat to, right? This is why Drain the Swamp was resonated with them, right? And the very soul of the country. He misidentified what the very soul of the country was earlier, so whatever. He's saying these things are the very soul of the country. Okay, let's keep going.
They look at the mob that stormed the United States Capitol on January 6th, brutally attacking law enforcement, not as insurrectionists who placed a dagger at the throat of our democracy, but they look at them as patriots.
Okay. First of all, some of them look at them as patriots. I look at them actually as misguided patriots. Sure, maybe not the best idea. But why do we look at them as patriots, Joe? Well, a couple reasons. First of all, this was not remotely an insurrection, and everyone knows it was nowhere near an insurrection. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to call that an insurrection. And it's so over the top that it's hard to take you seriously. Although if you repeat it often enough, I guess people will believe it. We also look at them as patriots because democracy is not the same as America. Those aren't the same thing. And I think that they honestly were wanting to defend the ideas behind America, and they didn't trust the electoral system. Like, okay, well, if you don't trust the electoral system, you're not against democracy. You're just not trusting this particular outcome for legitimate reasons. Frankly, we were told we couldn't ask questions about it, so that's immediately suspicious. And as I mentioned, the election was at the very least rigged by the cathedral. We don't have to talk about whether it was legitimate or not in terms of like technically, but it was definitely rigged by the cathedral. It was definitely rigged by, I'll say influenced by, manipulated by the media. We know that. All right. Also brutally attacking law enforcement. Yeah, I mean, there was some law enforcement that got beat up. But also Ashley Babbitt says hi. So.
And they see their MAGA failure to stop a peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election as preparation for the 2022 and 2024 elections. They tried everything last time to nullify the votes of 81 million people. This time, they're determined to succeed in thwarting the will of the people.
Okay, first of all, I don't think they were trying to stop a peaceful transfer of power. They were trying to go through, they wanted a double checking of the process. They wanted to push results back to states so that states could recertify them, and make sure they were certified again. Like they didn't like storm the White House and like set up camp and a little sign that said, Chaz, and be like, it's ours, we're not giving it back. Like, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. They wanted the results to not be certified. They wanted to send them back to the state and have them rechecked. So, okay, fine. And by the way, I just keep needing to remind people of this. The will of the people is not the fundamental American principle, right? Just because the people want 87,000 new IRS agents vis-a-vis Joe Biden doesn't mean that we should get 87,000 new IRS agents. They shouldn't have any. The rights of, the government shouldn't be doing that at all, right? Like, I get that there was an amendment passed in 1913, but Woodrow Wilson, by the way, but still. So, I mean, this is, more scare language here. Okay, let's keep going.
That's why respected conservatives like Federal Circuit Court Judge Michael Ludwig has called Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans, quote, a clear and present danger to our democracy.
First of all, by the way, thank you to the for the super chat from Justifiably Stupid. Okay, so he says this judge called Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans, quote, a clear and present danger to our democracy. Clear and present danger language is another piece of evidence that I'm going to throw out there as, which leads me to believe that he is prepping to do something. Clear and present danger was a doctrine that was adopted by the Supreme Court to determine when there can be limits on the First Amendment, like freedom of speech or press or assembly. Like if there's a clear and present danger, that was replaced. So now I think it's an imminent lawness test. But clear and present danger is language that is generally used to justify excessive or expansion of aggression in some way. Like, well, we wouldn't do this, but they're a clear and present danger. So this is why I'm suspicious that something's going on, that there's some plan here that he's prepping us for. I don't know what it is. Yeah. All right, let's listen to some more of this dude.
But while the threat to American democracy is real, I want to say as clearly as we can, we are not powerless in the face of these threats. We are not bystanders in this ongoing attack on democracy. There are far more Americans from every background and belief who reject the extreme MAGA ideology than those that accept it. And folks.
Okay, so he's trying to marginalize extreme MAGA ideology. I don't even know really what that means, because he never really defined what extreme MAGA ideology is, but that's intentional. It just is a stand-in for political opponents and people who oppose the progressive agenda. And again, you see this language of like attack on democracy. Like, well, that shouldn't bother you. Like, attack on individual rights should bother you. Attack on democracy, yeah, okay. I guess that's sort of a problem unless the attack is, hey, democracy is violating our individual rights. In which case, well, maybe the attack on democracy is justified. Maybe democracy needs to be told to sit down, shut up, and follow the Constitution. But anyway, look, if it were true, so he's saying there's far more people. The number of extreme MAGA people is so small, right? If that were true, he wouldn't need to be prepping us for this imminent exercise of power, which I think he's doing, right? So if they weren't a real threat, he wouldn't need to have this speech. He's having the speech precisely because they are a threat, or he feels like they're a threat. All right.
It's within our power. It's in our hands, yours and mine, to stop the assault on American democracy. I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those moments that determine the shape of everything that's to come after. And now, America must choose to move forward or to move backwards, to build a future or obsess about the past, to be a nation of hope and unity and optimism, or a nation of fear, division, and of darkness.
By the way, someone in chat, I think is Greg, says he doesn't define democracy either. Yeah, of course not. But he's not going to define any of this stuff, really. And he's not relying on you to have a clear understanding. What he's trying to do is use words that evoke feelings, right? So, hey, assault on democracy, American, that sounds bad, right? By the way, I do find it rich that he says to build the future or obsess about the past. Gee, which group is obsessing about the past? Which group is the one who, which ideology stops before their show? If I was a member of that ideology, I would have said before my show, I recognize that I'm broadcasting from the sacred land of the people who once were oppressed by the white man. Who is focusing on the past? It's not the MAGA Republicans. It's really not any Republicans. It's the progressives, and they're using the past to justify the acquisition of power and their collectivist intersectionalism, right? Like they're the ones obsessing about the past. But so again, lots of this stuff is often projection. I think also here he's building up to this idea that there's, well, not building up. He's saying there's this crisis. America's at an inflection point. It's one of these moments that determines everything. This is a crisis. He's also said now we've heard him say it's a clear and present danger. It's a crisis. Things are coming to a head. I think he's really building up towards, he's laying the groundwork for getting our permission, getting the people's permission for something, right? And look, I mean, most of the hope and unity and optimism, there's such empty words, right? Don't criticize me. If you criticize me, you lack hope and optimism. And by the way, unity, great, thank you. Unity, Biden's version of unity here requires vilifying 74 million voters, right? We'll be together as long as we get rid of these half of the country here, right? This is the problem. And also unity, by the way, is a common authoritarian theme. They like unity. That's a good one. Because you're supposed to sacrifice for unity. You're supposed to sit down and shut up. We need unity, right? Compromise for unity. That's why they call for unity. Very few politicians are like, yeah, we have discord. That's okay. People disagree. Let's ride the wave of, disagreement. We need unity because we need to wield power. Fear, division, and darkness, obviously, those are just, more meaningless crap. They're just in opposition to hope, unity, and optimism, and he's just using them to evoke emotions. All right.
MAGA Republicans have made their choice. They embrace anger. They thrive on chaos. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies.
Okay, so I'm about unity. Also, the other side are bad guys. Not all of them, as I've said, but basically all of them. I mean, just the half of the country that voted for Trump and the majority of the Republican Party and normal people. But there's a few rhinos I get along with, so that's cool. They don't have to be taken care of yet, but I'm all about unity. And these other guys, they made their choice. They're not about unity, so up against the wall, Republicans. All right, here we go.
But together we can choose a different path. We can choose a better path forward to the future. A future of possibility, a future to build and dream and hope. And we're on that path moving ahead. I know this nation. I know you, the American people. I know your courage. I know your hearts. And I know our history.
All right. Towards the end of the speech, it's going to be hard to really comment on it because he's just throwing out verbal chum to people with low IQ. This is just all build the better future, better path, move forward. I know you have courage. It's like, all right, that's okay. I mean, if you're that low IQ and low self-esteem that you're like, thanks, Biden. Like, I don't know what to say to you. If that means anything to you, I don't know what to say to you. It means absolutely nothing. It's just chum. All right, let's go on.
This is a nation that honors our Constitution. We do not reject it.
Since when? I mean, maybe the nation might, but I'm pretty sure Washington doesn't.
This is a nation that believes in the rule of law. We do not repudiate it.
Well, some laws, when we want to. We really also believe in the rule of men, which is why people responded to Trump's message of drain the swamp, right? One of the reasons that Trump resonated with people was because they don't trust that the bureaucracy is representative of the rule of law. It's a swamp. And by the way, I just I can prove that we're not a nation of laws. That I can prove that we don't have rule of law right now. That the current people in Washington, that the current people running the country, do not believe in rule of law. And my proof is this: there's way more written in law books. There's way more laws than any one person could possibly comprehend. We don't know what the laws are. And when you live in a world like that, it's impossible. It's impossible to be under a system that you're ruled by law. I'm not ruled by law. You know why? I don't know the law. No one does. Neither do you. None of you. No one knows the law. No one in America knows the full law. Therefore, when I go to do something, I'm not worried about whether it's illegal or not. I'm worried about whether some agent of the state is going to get mad at me for it. There might be a law against it. I don't know. Some things I know. I know you can't speed, right? Like there's some stuff I know. But in general, I mean, there's so many laws. I don't know what the volume is, but maybe someone can look it up and post it in chat. But like the volume of laws, and you have to throw in, by the way, regulatory rules on top of that, because those are enforced. You know, the regulation is an extension of the law, right? The Congress has empowered an executive agency to, you know, use force to regulate in some way. So there's all that regulation that's, you know, it's de facto law. So you can't possibly say we're a nation where we're run by rule of law, but no one knows what it is. That's not law. Law is when you know clearly what it is you're supposed to do. When you want to start a business, you know, these are the things I got to do, and that's it. And then I can't get in trouble if I just do these things. Everything else is fine. I won't get in trouble. There's nothing I can do to get in trouble. That's not the way it is at all, right? If you're gardening this afternoon, which it's hot in most places, so maybe you shouldn't be outside gardening. Like, you might be violating an EPA regulation. You don't know. You very likely are. I mean, I've mentioned this before. I think someone wrote a book called I forget what the name of the book is, but it's something about, we violate like 6 federal laws a day on average. That's not a rule of law. That the reason that there are all those laws is precisely so they can be selectively chosen for prosecution. Like, you can be selectively chosen for prosecution. So the idea that, I mean, people might believe that the rule of law is a good idea, but clearly Washington doesn't believe that. Otherwise, they would repeal 99.9% of what they've got on the books. What they believe in is the rule of the proletariat.
This is a nation that respects free and fair elections. We honor the will of the people. We do not deny it.
I mean, I've said this a million times. No. We ought to be, we ought to be a nation that questions free and fair and are allowed to question whenever anything happens. We should be allowed to question it and not get, thrown in virtual jail or our actual jail for questioning stuff. And second, we ought to be willing to restrain the will of the people in the name of protecting individual rights. I feel like a broken record, but, again, Biden embodies the will of the people, so that's all that matters. And his idea of following the Constitution is, hey, people want me, so, whatever the will of the people is, that's the end.
And this is a nation that rejects violence as a political tool. We do not encourage violence.
Except for the summer of 2020. And also whenever it benefits Marxists. When Antifa wants it, then we totally encourage political violence. We just don't accept it when there's some mild violence from the other side. That's just to be clear. Also, let's just pause for a minute because I think this is fun. I found this the other day. I didn't realize this existed. I don't think it went anywhere. But there was an Expel Maxine Waters resolution. Let's just read. Maxine Waters is probably the dumbest member of... I don't know. She used to be the dumbest member. Maybe she's not anymore of Congress. Okay. Whereas in the wake of the Rodney King riots in May 1992, Representative Waters said, quote, "If you call it a riot, it sounds like it was just a bunch of crazy people who went out and did bad things for no reason. I maintain it was somewhat understandable, if not acceptable, so I call it a rebellion." Oh, okay. On January 27th, 2017, she told an anti-Iraq war rally, "My name is Maxine Waters, and I'm not afraid of George Bush. My name is Maxine Waters, and I'm not intimidated by Dick Cheney. My name is Maxine Waters, and I have to get rid of Rumsfeld." Yeah. Okay. Again, that's pretty mild as well. I wouldn't get upset about that, but if Trump said it, boy, they would. On October 20th, 2017, Representative Waters told a crowd at an LGBTQ youth gala, quote, "With this kind of inspiration, I will go and take Trump out tonight." Yeah, she didn't mean anything by that, I'm sure. June 23rd, 2018, quote, "If you see anybody from President Trump's cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them that they are not welcome anymore anywhere." Yeah, this is all normal. Okay, September 8th, 2018, quote, "I did not threaten Trump constituents and supporters. I do that all the time, but I didn't do it that time." Oh, thanks, Maxine. That was the low IQ portion of her. Someone probably was like, let's just accuse her. I don't know the story, but I could imagine, like, she's pretty dumb. Let's just say that she threatened Trump constituents and see if she says, "Not that time." And she did. All right. April 17th, 2021. She told violent protesters, quote, "We've got to stay on the street. We've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business." She traveled across state lines to promote and encourage riots that led to violence and community destruction, which is a felony punishable up to 5 years in prison. She threatened a jury if they did not find a guilty verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin. There's more. I'll stop reading, but I found I just think that's funny in light of, hey, we reject political violence as a tool. We don't encourage it. Don't we? Don't we, Joe? Tell that to Maxine Waters. Okay.
We are still an America that believes in honesty and decency and respect for others. Patriotism, liberty, justice for all, hope, possibilities. We are still, at our core, a democracy.
I feel like he's just like reciting some, Superman cliches. Liberty, justice for all, apple pie, Americanism, patriotism, liberty. Here's a bunch of words. Hey, do any of these buzzwords make you feel a way? I don't know what they mean or care, but I'm throwing them out. This is just more low IQ drivel, right? And it's repetition that democracy matters, right? The democracy. Biggest lie about America ever. Democracy.
And yet, history tells us that blind loyalty to a single leader and a willingness to engage in political violence is fatal to democracy. For a long
Okay. As I mentioned, the left no longer really needs a single leader because they don't have that problem because they've captured the institutions. They did the long march as opposed to the path of Stalin or Hitler or whatever. And now that they're in control, political violence was bad. But of course, it hasn't been bad as long as they didn't feel like they were in control. It was normal and encouraged. So, does history tell us that a blind leader and a willingness to engage in political violence is fatal to democracy? I don't know, maybe, sure. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to be a blind loyalist to Trump, but that's not really the problem, is it? All right, here we go.
Long time, we've told ourselves that American democracy is guaranteed, but it's not. We have to defend it, protect it, stand up for it, each and every one of us. That's why tonight I'm asking our nation to come together, unite behind the single purpose of defending our democracy regardless of your ideology.
Okay, so obviously your ideology plays a role in whether you think democracy as such is worth defending. So He's asking you, like, regardless of your ideology, do my ideology. Oh, okay. Thanks, Joe. And also, look, if he had said individual rights, I would be on board with this particular part of the speech, right? If he said, for a long time, we've told ourselves that American individual rights is guaranteed, but they're not. We have to defend them, protect them, stand up for them. Each and every one of us. That's why tonight I'm asking our nation to come together, unite behind the single purpose of defending individual rights, regardless of your ideology. Now, it would be ridiculous to say regardless of your ideology, because there's a large swath of the country that doesn't believe in individual rights. Their ideology is inimical to individual rights. But at least that would be fine. When you throw the word democracy in there, it's like, I don't... I'm tired of watching democracies around the world vote for actual socialists. I don't know why that's the thing that we need to defend. I do know why that's what we need to defend, because he wants to move in the direction of progressivism, and unadulterated, unfettered democracy will allow him to do that more easily than, say, defending individual rights and the limits of the Constitution.
We're all called by duty and conscience to confront extremists who put their own pursuit of power above all else.
I've already done my extremist rant. Obviously, this is a mischaracterization. I mean, you could argue that Trump just kind of wants power or whatever. I mean, maybe, I don't know. But not the people that are behind him are not pursuing power. I mean, this is not... The problem isn't that... And I think Biden knows this, by the way, which is why they're scared of Trump in particular. The problem isn't that there's like this huge love of Trump as a person. Some people, sure. But the problem for them, the problem for the progressives, is there's a large swath of the country that voted for Trump because, as Sam Harris said, they just wanted to tear it down. They wanted to tear down, and I'm one of them. I didn't want to tear down the nation. I wanted to tear down the apparatus of the deep state. Right? I wanted a bull in the china shop. It's not nihilistic. Right? The argument is that that's nihilism. It's not nihilism. Right? If you're in a neighborhood controlled by the mob, and you have an opportunity, someone comes along and they're like, I'll dismantle the apparatus of the mob, and you're like, yeah, that's not nihilism. So anyway, this is a mischaracterization of him, right? We're called by duty and conscience to confront extremists who put their own pursuit of power above all else. Like, okay, that's a throwaway line. It doesn't really mean much in particular here. Let's keep moving.
Democrats, independents, mainstream Republicans, we must be stronger, more determined, and more committed to saving American democracy than MAGA Republicans are to destroying American democracy.
By the way, mainstream Republicans are MAGA Republicans, basically, is my understanding, especially since he was the nominee in 2020, and he did get, 74 million votes. So, yeah, pretty mainstream. I'm going to use this opportunity again to highlight the difference here when he says destroying American democracy. I want to be clear here. There is a distinction between the American government, the state apparatus. This is the entire bureaucracy of all the executive agencies, and all of the swamp in Washington and that surrounds the ruling class. There's a difference between that American government and the principles, the idea of America, the idea of individual rights and liberty. And those two things aren't just different. They are opposed to one another. When you cease to become patriot when you're willing to support the government if the government is actually attacking the reason that America is good, right? So you can maybe an obvious example for people who are struggling with this. If you actually did elect, let's say Trump was literally Hitler, and you actually elected Hitler, and he started doing all these obviously, setting up concentration camps and blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, it's not patriotic. It's not patriotic if you're against me because I'm the legitimately elected leader. The answer is it's patriotic to oppose you because you have corrupted the idea of the country. You're the anti-American. And that's where we are now. The people running America, by and large, are the anti-Americans.
We, the people, will not let anyone or anything tear us apart. Today, there are dangers around us we cannot allow to prevail. We here, you've heard it, more and more talk about violence as an acceptable political tool in this country. It's not. It can never be an acceptable tool. So I want to say this plain and simple. There is no place for political violence in America, period. None, ever.
Except the summer of 2020 and some other times when the left wants it. Look, I mean, this is just, he's repeating himself, so I would have to repeat myself in this analogy. He's just repeating the same thing with different, slightly different language, not even that different. But he's clearly saying this is an existential threat, right? He's clearly saying there's a crisis here. There's like violence happening. Like it really seems like he's wanting power to do something or other.
We saw law enforcement brutally attacked on January 6th. We've seen election officials, poll workers, many of them volunteers of both parties, subject to intimidation and death threats. And can you believe it? FBI agents, just doing their job as directed, facing threats to their own lives from their own fellow citizens.
Can you believe it? FBI agents doing nothing more than getting faulty information and feeding it into the FISA courts, and then, painting a false picture of Trump and Russia collusion and texting their girlfriend about how we can't let him win. Can you believe that? I can't believe FBI agents they're just doing their job, just like Waco and Ruby Ridge, just doing their job. Why is everyone upset? They're just doing their job. Just like the Stasi.
On top of that, there are public figures today, yesterday, and the day before predicting and all but calling for mass violence and rioting in the streets.
Let's just go back to, it is called House Resolution 327, if you want to look it up. It's sponsored by Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's called the Expel Maxine Waters Resolution for Incitement of Violence and Rioting in the United States. So, yeah, just throw that out there. I don't know if that's the public figure he's talking about. Could be.
This is inflammatory. It's dangerous. It's against the rule of law. And we, the people, must say, this is not who we are.
Is it against the rule of law? Because he didn't say they were calling for mass violence. He said they were predicting and all but calling for mass violence. So is that against the law? I didn't think it was. I thought it was protected speech. But hey, it's not who we are, though. Unless it's Maxine Waters, that is who she is. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can't be pro-insurrectionist and pro-American. They're incompatible. We can't allow...
Did you hear that? We can't be pro-insurrectionist and pro-American. They're incompatible. Dear Thomas Jefferson, pro-American's not the goal, by the way. Pro-American ideas, right? Pro the ideas that America was founded on. That's moral. Pro-American with complete disregard for the moral status of the American government is you don't get a moral badge for that. You don't get applause from that from me morally. I support my government no matter what they do. Like, all right, well, you're just not a moral person then. Like, that's, we don't celebrate. I don't celebrate the founding fathers because they like happen to live geographically in this. I mean, I'm in California now, so not even anywhere near me, but like happen to live geographically, and we're kind of, you're my neighbor, so I support you. It's the ideas. If they had established communism, well, it would have been proto-communism, but if they had established proto-communism, I would be saying what they established sucks. Like we need to do something else. But they didn't. It was their ideas that matter. So again, he's standing here at Independence Hall. He's trying to evoke the love of the founding fathers and the love of the ideal of America. And he's trying to get you to conflate it with the current American deep state and the current agenda of the American government. And they're not the same thing. They're opposed to one another.
Allow violence to be normalized in this country. It's wrong. We each have to reject political violence with all the moral clarity and conviction this nation can muster now.
So I will stand by this. If he says we can't allow violence to be normalized in this country, it's wrong. We have to reject political violence. Sure. Let's start with rejecting the violence of the state against us. That's where I start. Because, saying that we have to comply with your unconstitutional and immoral rules because you have the guns or more of the guns and the majority is on your side, or the will of the people is what you represent, that doesn't cut it for me. That doesn't mean that you get to have violence. No, that's political violence. You don't get to wield political violence and then tell us we can't.
We can't let the integrity of our elections be undermined, for that is a path to chaos.
Well, look, if you're worried about the election integrity being undermined, maybe close the FBI. Disempower the entire cathedral. Sorry, I'll stop. I can't help it.
Look, I know politics can be fierce and mean and nasty in America. I get it. I believe in the give and take of politics, in disagreement and debate and dissent. We're a big, complicated country. But democracy endures only if we, the people, respect the guardrails of the republic. Only if we, the people, accept the results of free and fair elections. Only if we, the people, see politics not as total war, but mediation of our differences.
Okay, look, if you want to respect the guardrails of the republic, repeal everything, every single law and every executive order, and disempower every federal agency that's not explicitly authorized by the Constitution. Not by driving a truck through the interstate commerce clause and pretending that it applies to everything, but dismantle the unconstitutional apparatus. If you care about the guardrail, you can't only care about the guardrails of the republic when it's with respect to, quote, free and fair elections, which we've already talked about, the freedom and fairness of the elections. So look, and he's also like, hey, don't see politics as a total war, but a mediation of our differences. Okay, well, this is again that the strategy the leftists have used against the right, and it's the right's fault, right? Because the right has no principles generally, and they don't stick to their principles at all. So they're in constant compromise mode, and he likes it. He's like, yeah, politics is compromise. I say we should be crazy communists. You say, not so fast. So we don't go as fast towards crazy communism, right? Like, there is no compromise. There's no compromise between communism and capitalism. There's not a compromise, and there can't be. And the minute that the supposed defenders of capitalism compromise and say, well, a little bit, they've lost, and maybe it take a few generations, but they've lost, and they've normalized compromise. It's one thing that I liked about Ron Paul, one of the few congressmen who generally just didn't compromise.
Democracy cannot survive when one side believes there are only two outcomes to an election. Either they win or they were cheated. And that's where the MAGA Republicans are today. They don't understand what every patriotic American knows. You can't love your country only when you win. It's fundamental.
Can't love your country only when you win. Well, again, you can love the principles of your country whether you win or lose, but you can't claim to love the principles if you blindly follow the leadership, regardless of their adherence to the principles or even adherence to the written Constitution. So, okay, I'm going to get bogged down. There's still more to go in this speech. I want to wrap this up here. So, here we go.
American democracy only works only if we choose to respect the rule of law and the institutions that were set up in this chamber behind me. Only if we respect our legitimate political differences.
Again, so he's reminding you of where he is. He's trying to get some of that appreciation for America to rub off on him. And the progressive agenda, which he is representative of at this point. He says, look, it only works if we choose to respect the rule of law. I've talked about the rule of law. I've talked about the corruption of the institutions and how anti-American they are. And the truth is, American democracy is not working. It is not working. It's broken. It is not working to protect individual rights. If any one of the founding fathers parachuted into America in 2022, they would want to start a war. It's not working. No, none of them would say, yeah, this is great. This is exactly what we had in mind when we said, when we cared about individual rights and included the Bill of Rights. None of them. It's not working. Should it work? I mean, I wish it was working, but it's not. So maybe we should really rethink about when we need to do something drastic. I don't know what it is. I'd prefer that we could do it by voting. Maybe we have to secede. Maybe some states have to secede, as we've talked about in the past. But it's not working. It's working for the ruling class. It's working for all the bureaucrats in Washington. It works fine for them. They love the administrative state. But it's not working. It's not protecting individual rights. It's not doing what the founding fathers set out to do. In fact, it's doing exactly what they were afraid it would end up doing. Exactly. It's become the monster they were worried about.
I will not stand by and watch. I will not, the will of the American people, be overturned by wild conspiracy theories and baseless evidence-free claims of fraud. I will not stand by and watch elections in this country stolen by people who simply refuse to accept that they lost.
Well, we've gone over a lot of this already, so I don't want to repeat, but I will ask a question. How are they stealing the elections? He says he refused to accept... He's not gonna I'll not stand by and watch elections in this country stolen. What are you talking about? First of all, Biden, I was under the impression that our electoral process was perfectly free and fair, and it's the best it's ever been, and it's completely legitimate, and anyone who questions it is a conspiracy theorist and an election denier. So what are you talking about that the elections are being stolen? That's not possible. You told me it's not possible, and I'm not even allowed to ask about it. So what the hell are you talking about? The worst people are doing is making noise that you don't like about their distrust in the electoral process. Okay. So you don't like it. But again, I think he's teeing something up. Maybe what he's teeing up for here is federal involvement in elections, which, has been a point of discussion about getting, the federal government more involved in elections and not leading it to states. Maybe that's what he's teeing up to do. I don't know.
I will not stand by and watch the most fundamental freedom in this country, the freedom to vote, and have your vote counted and be taken from you and the American people.
Oh, it's not a fundamental freedom, which I think I've done discussion on voting before, so we don't have to get into that, but that's not a fundamental freedom, first of all. Second of all, we've already talked about this. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean it's taken from people? What are you talking about? I thought you stop questioning the integrity of the American elections, Mr. Biden. I can't believe that you're an election denier. That's what it seems like. It sounds like you're an election denier, and I won't stand by and watch you be an election denier, Mr. President.
Look, as your president, I will defend our democracy with every fiber of my being, and I'm asking every American to join me.
I don't want you to do that. I want you to defend the Constitution with every fiber of your being. I want you to defend individual rights with every fiber of your being. I don't want you to defend just democracy. The reason that you'll defend democracy is because you won the culture war. So, yeah, you won the culture war. You've captured all the institutions. So, yeah, of course you're going to defend democracy. Defending democracy is defending your tyranny. That's what it is.
Throughout our history, America has often made the greatest progress coming out of some of our darkest moments, like you're hearing that bullhorn. I believe we can and must do that again, and we are. MAGA Republicans look at America and see carnage and darkness and despair. They spread fear and lies. Lies told for profit and power.
I mean, first of all, I feel bad for the heckler with the bullhorn, because he was just painted at he's now part of the darkest moments of American history. That's what Biden just said. Throughout our history, America has often made the greatest progress coming out of some of the darkest moments, like you're hearing in that bullhorn. This heckler at this particular speech is one of the darkest moments in American history. Mark your calendars. Everyone, what day was it? Was it I don't actually remember what day it was. Today's the 7th. So it was like the 1st, probably. So September 1st, 2022. It's one of the darkest moments in American history. Okay. So he says also, carnage of darkness and despair. That's just, rhetoric. Fine. They spread and fear lies told for power and profit. I mean, can you project much? You mean like Pfizer level lies, or Google level lies, or Facebook or Twitter level lies? Those kind of lies? COVID lockdown lies? What are they talking about? Who is profiting from spreading pro-freedom lies, or MAGA Republican lies? I guess maybe there's a couple websites like promoting some QAnon stuff. If you want to talk about profit, let's talk about how the largest transfer of wealth from middle America to rich people happened because you destroyed, and partly Trump's at fault for this as well, but Biden didn't repeal this. You destroyed American businesses with your COVID lockdown crap. You destroyed them. And I think Trump actually did this, but again, Biden didn't undo it. You're in the hands of the Pfizers and the Modernas, where you've mandated for large swaths of the population to buy their product. Oh, and also you did that with healthcare. You mandated that people buy healthcare from big insurance companies. So who's spreading lies for power and profit? Who's in power? By the way, the MAGA Republicans, they don't look at America and see carnage and darkness and despair. What they do is they look at America and they see that the leftist ideology is a cancer that has entered the bloodstream, and they're really hoping for some chemo. That's how they look at America.
But I see a different America. An America with an
The cancer does see a different America, of course, yes.
unlimited future. An America that's about to take off. I hope you see it as well. Just look around. I believe we could lift America from the depths of COVID. So we passed the largest economic recovery package since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And today, America's economy is faster, stronger than any other advanced nation in the world. We have more to go. I believe we could build a better America. So we passed the biggest infrastructure investment since President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And we've now embarked on a decade of rebuilding the nation's roads, bridges, highways, ports, water systems, high-speed internet, railroads. I believe we could make America safer, so we passed the most significant gun safety law since President Clinton.
What were you saying about the Constitution earlier? I just forgot.
I believe we could go from being the highest cost of prescriptions in the world to making prescription drugs and healthcare more affordable. So we passed the most significant healthcare reform since President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act.
Lies and profits. Damn Republicans. My favorite part of the Constitution is the part where it says the government can force you to buy healthcare and completely socialize the healthcare system. I forget what amendment that is, but it's a great one. And, you know, thank you so much, Biden.
And I believe we could create a clean energy future and save the planet. So we passed the most important climate initiative ever.
I mean, yeah, the Constitution also says that. I like that. You can, you know, you can manage the economy if the temperature might rise slightly in the next 100 years. Then capitalism's totally off the table. That's good. I mean, we could say a lot about any of these topics. I just need to move on, or we'll be here forever.
The cynics and the critics tell us nothing can get done, but they're wrong. There is not a single thing America cannot do, not a single thing beyond our capacity if we do it together. It's never easy, but we're proving in America, no matter how long the road, progress does come.
First of all, who says nothing can get done? Like, he's making up villains. Those cynics and critics say that we can't get anything done, but they're wrong. Really? Who said that? Who are you talking about? And by the way, when he says not a single thing is beyond our capacity, if we do it together, what he means is if we do it through the compulsive force of the state and the government does it. That's what together means. He doesn't mean voluntary cooperation. A lot of the talk that just preceded, and I think maybe some after this, I don't remember. It's fantasy talk. So Nietzsche spoke about this when Nietzsche was obviously highly critical of religion, and he had his view. We're not going to get into Nietzsche's views on morality, but he basically had two views of morality: a master and a slave morality. And he kind of said the slave morality is an evolved morality that worked for the long-term preservation of religion. and he argues that that a lot of religious principles are parts of this the slave mentality, the slave morality. But what he says is necessary. It's reminding me of this. What he says is necessary in that case is you end up with people who are naturally more of the master morality kind of resonates with them, and so they resent having to be in this slave morality mindset all the time, and they're competent and strong, and they want to be leaders, and so they end up as priests. And one of the things that they do as priests is they, and this is the part that reminds me of what Biden's doing, they paint this fantasy of these are all the things that are going to happen later. These are all the great things that are going to happen as a result of adopting the morality that I'm pushing. They won't happen now, but don't worry. There's a time in the future. There's a magical day in the future when this will all happen. It will be in the afterlife and blah blah blah. Now, that's a religious version of this, but you also see this in secularism. You see, like, I mentioned the 5-year plans before. Communists were constantly like, and actually the Nazis did it too, right? Like, there's this. We're building this utopia. These are all the things that are going to happen. And of course, every time they passed a law or like initiated a program, they would celebrate it as if the success had happened. Like, oh, look, we're going, yay, we passed our 5-year plan. Yay, like success has happened. And that's what he's doing with all these things. I've passed this law. I've done this. We're funding that, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, none of those results are in. We're not going to see any of the results, but he's selling us on a fantasy. He's telling us to celebrate because he's legislated utopia. We just have to sit back and wait. So that's what it reminds me of. All right, let's keep going.
Look, I know the last few years have been tough, but today, COVID no longer controls our lives.
Quick point. COVID itself had actually very little control. It had some. It had a little control over our lives. What had control over our lives then is the government, and they still do. Now they have more entrenched control over our lives because we have given up more freedoms and accepted that the government has more control over our lives. So it wasn't COVID, it was the government. He's going to go on into some more propaganda about how everything is great and it will be great. So there's some more fantasy stuff coming up. I'm just going to let it go.
More Americans are working than ever. Businesses are growing. Our schools are open. Millions of Americans have been lifted out of poverty. Millions of veterans once exposed to toxic burn pits will now get what they deserve for their families and their compensation. American manufacturers come alive across the heartland, and the future will be made in America.
Is it coming alive across the heartland or the fatherland? I don't know. Just want to make sure he means what he's saying.
No matter what the white supremacists and the extremists say, I made a bet on you, the American people, and that bet is paying off, proving.
Okay, first of all, what? The white supremacists and extremists? We just now threw the white supremacists in with the quote MAGA extremists. I think that's what he means. And the MAGA extremists are basically most of the Republicans. So you're all white supremacists now. And apparently they say what? That manufacturing is not coming alive in der Vaterland? I don't know. What do they say? Like, what a weird... No matter what the white supremacists say, what, the three white supremacists that you follow incessantly and pretend are everyone? Like, what's he talking about? I have no idea what he's talking about on that. And then he says, I made a bet on you, American people, and that bet is paying off. No, Joe. The American people bet on you. You didn't bet on them. They bet on you. You just have a cushy job. This wasn't you didn't bet on them. They bet on you, sort of. Some of them bet on you. It's just a weird egotistical thing to say. Can you imagine? You're the president and you're telling the people, I bet on you. Thanks.
And from darkness, the darkness of Charlottesville, of COVID, of gun violence, of insurrection, we can see the light. Light is now visible. light that will guide us forward, not only in words, but in actions. Actions for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, for America.
We see the light. 5 lights, not 4 lights. I don't know. This is just, all this means nothing. All right, let's keep going.
America. Even in this moment, with all the challenges we face, I give you my word as a Biden, I've never been more optimistic about America's future. Not because of me, but because of who you are.
Oh, your word as a Biden. Trusted by hookers and Ukrainian oligarchs everywhere. Your word as a Biden. Thanks, Joe. You know how much that means to me, your word as a Biden? Really, thank you.
We're going to end cancer as we know it. Mark my words.
What? This is more fantasy crap. We're going to end cancer. Who's we, by the way? I don't think he's got a pipette in the lab somewhere like, ending cancer. There's no we. If cancer is ended, it's like some small group of smart scientists who devoted their lives to studying some particular thing and ending cancer. And, probably would have done it a lot more quickly if the government wasn't the one dishing out research funding all the time and the pharmaceutical and medical industry weren't intertwined with the government. But hey, at least it might still happen someday. But there's no we. I don't get to take credit for it, and you certainly don't get to take credit for it. Biden. So this is just more fantasy crap. Like the lion will lay down with the lamb. Everything's going to be, it's Shangri-La. Cancer will be cured. Just vote for me.
We're going to create millions of new jobs in a clean energy economy.
Yeah, never mind the standard of living, gas prices. Although, again, who the hell's we? We're going to create jobs. And when we look at the jobs balance sheet, we're not going to look at the cost for anything we've done. We're only going to look at a way to justify, hey, we spent this much money and it, quote, created these jobs. And when anyone asks what it costs to do that and what the impact of our behavior, either printing money or taxing, whatever it is, we're just going to ignore that half of the balance sheet and then say, yay, victory, we created jobs. I love it. I wish I could do my accounting that way. Thank you.
We're going to think big. We're going to make the 21st century another American century because the world needs us to.
This is just more fantasy gobbledygook.
That's where we need to focus our energy. Not in the past, not on divisive culture wars, not on the politics of grievance, but on a future we can build together.
Okay. Wow. There's a lot in that little sentence. First of all, thank you so much for not being divisive, Joe. I appreciate you not focusing on the divisive culture wars. You literally basically won the culture war, but you're still fighting it. And saying that, hey, just half the population sucks and they're extremists. That's all. I mean, it's not all of them. Like I said, Liz Cheney's still on my side. But generally, okay, let's not focus on divisiveness, Joe. And then he says, not on the politics of grievance. I'm sorry, that's a core tenet of progressivism. Like that is grievance studies is progressivism. That's a core tenet of progressivism. That's not, the grievances aren't, those aren't the liberty-minded folks or even the MAGA Republicans that are focused on grievances. I'm pretty sure that's you, and I'm pretty sure that the focus on the past is also the progressives, as I've said before. All right? We're not the ones rewriting history, a false history, like rewriting history in things like the 1619 Project would have totally incorrect and debunked by historians, but still pushed everywhere. We're not the ones focused on the past. We're not the ones who are saying like, oh, well, we would teach math, but slavery happened a long time ago, and therefore, 2 + 2 is orange because that's what this person wants. Like, we're not the ones focusing on the past and saying it affects everything in the future. We're the ones saying, can we just move on and be individuals? It's the progressives that are focused on the past. which is why they have to name their movement progressivism, so that it sounds like it's not focused on the vest. But what a projection that was a real jumble of projections in that little sentence there.
The MAGA Republicans believe that for them to succeed, everyone else has to fail. They believe America is not like I believe about America.
I mean, that's just a hard no. I mean, in fact, one of the things I pulled up earlier, which I'm going to pull up again here for you to look at, one of number 5 on my list of the kind of collectivist versus individualist mentalities, the progressives versus the actual Americans. The progressives believe in the zero sum. They're the ones who think that for someone to succeed, everyone else has to fail. That's why they hate success, because they assume that means everyone else failed. That's not the MAGA Republicans, you moron. Or actually, just he's not a moron. He knows that's not the MAGA Republicans. He's dishonest. That is 100% projection. That's exactly what they believe. The liberty-minded people that you're trying to tie in with MAGA Republicans, the liberty-minded people, they just want to be left alone. That's all. They just want to be left alone.
I believe America is big enough for all of us to succeed. And that is the nation we're building, a nation where no one is left behind.
America is big enough for all of us to succeed. But Washington just has to get the hell out of our way. That's what needs to happen.
I ran for president because I believe we're in a battle for the soul of this nation. I still believe that to be true. I believe the soul is the breath, the life, and the essence of who we are. The soul is what makes us us.
Well, as long as it's vaguely defined, the soul sounds great. Maybe he's going to define it for us, I think, because his thesaurus ran out of euphemisms for soul. Here we go. He's going to define it.
The soul of America is defined by the sacred proposition that all are created equal in the image of God, that all are entitled to be treated with decency, dignity, and respect, that all deserve justice and a shot at lives of prosperity and consequence, and that democracy must be defended, for democracy makes all these things possible.
Okay, look, I mean, we don't have to sort through all these things. Some of those things matter, equal treatment under the law, right? Some of those things don't matter as much. Some of those things are contradictory. The soul, I mean, I would probably argue the soul is individual sovereignty, and which a specific version of democracy is intended to preserve. But democracy, like that's what makes these things possible. No. Democracy doesn't make those things possible. Democracy, a version of it was attempted to try and preserve some of those things, or at least preserve the recognition of some of those things, but it's kind of failed. So, and some of those things just don't belong together, right? Like everyone's entitled to be treated with decency. By whom? By the government? Sure. But like, what does that mean, right? So there's just a lot of more low IQ word salad stuff. Okay, here we go. We're getting close,
Folks, and it's up to us. Democracy begins and will be preserved in we, the people's habits of the heart, in our character, optimism that is tested yet endures, courage that digs deep when we need it, empathy that fuels democracy, the willingness to see each other not as enemies but as fellow Americans.
except for the maggots. Empathy that fuels democracy. Okay.
Look, our democracy isn't perfect. It always has been. Notwithstanding those folks you hear on the other side there. They're entitled to be outrageous. This is a democracy. But history and common sense Good manners is nothing they've ever suffered from.
That was a little ad lib there, if you didn't notice. He starts to say, but history and common sense. He gets an applause, and he's like, they like me. I'll say a thing that I know. Good manners is nothing they've ever suffered from. And then he goes back to his script in a minute after this. Also, I don't think he understands what the word notwithstanding means. Democracy is imperfect. It always has been. Notwithstanding those folks you hear on the other side there, well, that doesn't mean what you think it means, Joe. Okay. He's going to go back. He did his little ad-libbing. Good manners. There's nothing they've ever suffered from. He's proud of it. Let's let him continue with his teleprompter.
But history and common sense tell us that opportunity, liberty, and justice for all are most likely to come to pass in a democracy.
That actually might be true, but they're not guaranteed to come to pass in a democracy. And a democracy, if that's your focus, certainly doesn't guarantee that those things happen. So, again, it's a switching focus, right? Democracy being the method to try and achieve the end, the left realizes that democracy can achieve different ends that weren't the ends of the founding, that intended by the founding fathers. So they're going to focus on democracy because it can achieve the left's ends, which is not the point of America.
We have never fully realized the aspirations of our founding, but every generation has opened those doors a little bit wider to include more people who have been excluded before. My fellow Americans, America is an idea, the most powerful idea in the history of the world, and it beats in the hearts of the people of this country. It beats in all our hearts. It unites America. It is the American creed, the idea that America guarantees that everyone be treated with dignity. It gives hate no safe harbor. It installs in everyone the belief that no matter where you start in life, there's nothing you can't achieve.
Yeah, I guess we shouldn't go into it. It just take too long. Look, I'm a broken record on this because he's repeating himself, right? The American creed is based on individual sovereignty, the idea that individual rights exist a priori to government. Like that's the thing about America, not giving hate no safe harbor. Those are just all nice words, but they're not the essence of what America is.
That's who we are. That's what we stand for. That's what we believe. And that's precisely what we're doing. Opening doors, creating possibilities, focusing on the future. And we're only just beginning.
Soon we'll close doors and open windows and drive cars. All right.
Our task is to make our nation free and fair, just and strong, noble and whole.
All right, look, let's just Socrates him for one moment. What do you mean by free? What do you mean by fair? What do you mean by just? What do you mean by strong? What do you mean by noble? What do you mean by whole? What are you talking about? He doesn't care. That's an abstract list. It's a word salad. It's abstract. There's no clarity on the meanings of these things. This language, by the way, the reason to use abstract ideas like this and to throw them out as a jumble, like, are free and fair the same thing? Are they related? Is just and free the same thing? Is strong and fair or just? What's noble? What, like, is whole? Like, is whole the same as free? Is it fair to be whole? Like, none of that stuff means anything. He throws it out because it's like a spray and pray ideological strategy. He's going to throw abstract concepts out, and he hopes that one or two of them resonate with you, and you go, oh, I want to be noble and whole, or whatever. And whatever that means to you, he's not going to describe what it means because he doesn't care or know. All right, so strap in for some more word salad. Here we go.
And this work is the work of democracy, the work of this generation. It is the work of our time, for all time. We can't afford to leave
70% of the time. He's right 100% of the time.
Anyone on the sidelines. We need everyone to do their part. So speak up, speak out, get engaged, vote, vote, vote.
All right, so this is legitimize the system, vote because we own the culture, and we love the democracy.
And if we do our duty in 2022 and beyond, then ages still to come will say, we, all of us here, we kept the faith. We preserved democracy. We heeded our worst. We heeded not our worst instincts, but our better angels. We proved that for all its imperfections, America is still the beacon to the world, an ideal to be realized, a promise to be kept. There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred, nothing more American. That's our soul. That's who we truly are. And that's who we must always be.
I'm actually not sure what he is saying who we are here. I mean, I've read it a few times. I have it written down. We heeded not our worst instincts that are better angels. America's a beacon to the world, to be an idea to be realized. Nothing more important, more sacred, nothing more American. There's nothing more American than the idea that Americans a beacon to the world. I'm not sure. That's our soul. That's who we are. It's okay. By the way, if America isn't ideal to be realized, then you fight the American government because it's the exact opposite of, not the exact, but it is poisonous to the ideal of America, as articulated by the Founding Fathers.
I have no doubt, none, that this is who we will be, and that we'll come together as a nation that will secure our democracy, that for the next 200 years, we'll have what we had the past 200 years, the greatest nation on the face of the earth. We just...
I'm just reminded of that line from, if you ever watched Fifth Element, there's a moment where the general or something is going to fire a missile. And the president's like, I have a doubt. The guy's like, I don't. I do feel like saying to Biden, I have a doubt. I do have a doubt. That doesn't make me nihilistic. It doesn't make me pessimistic. I have a doubt that for the next 200 years, America will be the greatest nation on the face of the earth. I don't have a doubt that it's possible to save the ideas behind America in some part of the world, perhaps a subset of America, that will survive for 200 years and be a beacon. I just have a doubt that Washington will be the center. That's my doubt. And I have a very strong doubt that Biden will be the ancestor to any of that.
We need to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. The United States of America.
He's emphasizing united. United! United! Kill the MAGA Republicans. I mean, united. That's what I meant to say. All right, here we go. This is his last little thing.
And may God protect our nation, and may God protect all those who stand watch over our democracy. God bless you all. Democracy. Thank you.
Democracy. That's my favorite. My favorite part of the whole thing is democracy. Thank you. Democracy. All right. Word to you, Biden. That's it. I know this was a long episode. I'm sorry, but I did want to go through the whole speech, like I said, because I think it's, I think it has cultural significance both in the aesthetics and in the content. And I did want to talk about the culture war a little bit, and this gave me an opportunity to kind of, I think, articulate what I think about when I think about the culture war, and really draw the boundaries between the progressives and I'll just call them the Americans. And again, if you missed it at the beginning, those are the six kind of pillars, I would say, of the culture, the six aspects of the culture war. Progressive stuff on the left-hand column, American stuff on the right-hand column. So go go rewind, and if you're interested in that, go rewind and check it out if you didn't. All right, we should shut down here, but let me quickly look through chat. Oh, I should end the poll. So we did a poll in chat. The poll was Biden's speech at Independence Hall reminded you of. There are 4 choices: Adam Sutler in V for Vendetta, Emperor Palpatine, a Leni Riefenstahl film, and the Founding Fathers. Well, there was one person that looked like early on who voted for the Founding Fathers, but he or she was overwhelmed. So now it's rounding to 0% on the Founding Fathers. So very nice. Okay. The winner is Adam Sutler in V for Vendetta. You know, that's what it reminded me most of as well. So that's what I would have said. And 102 votes. So good. I don't see anything in I don't see anything in chat that I need to address. I know Greg the Baritone said I was silent. I know there was a moment where I was talking but I didn't say anything important. Don't worry, where the microphone was muted. Also, Alex of All Trades. Hey, Alex is in chat. I didn't realize that. She says, so Hochul and Warren have both come out as fascists tonight. That's sweet. You should support when people come out. Asking Visa and MasterCard to report firearm purchases to the government. Yeah, and I'm sure you don't have to compel them, but if you ask nicely, hey, we are the government, and if you don't comply, there's just a little bit of regulation in the financial industry that we could totally come after you for. I would not be surprised if they do that. So I guess you should start printing your guns, 3D printed guns, and or buy guns with cash. That's the way to do it. All right, thank you everyone for sticking with me. This is a much longer show than I expected. As a reminder, I do like to do address from the community. I'm trying to help us work our way through some troublesome arguments. So if you have arguments that you're having trouble refuting or arguments that you'd like to make, you have trouble articulating, let me know in Discord or wherever else, and we'll try and work through them on a show, upcoming show sometime soon. We've done a couple of them so far, and I'd like to continue doing that because I think it makes us all better debaters, and it makes us all smarter if we can figure stuff out together. Sometimes I'm not the best at articulating arguments, and you guys can jump in and correct my errors, but I think it's a good exercise to do together. So if you got any of those, drop them in Discord, let me know. An enormous thank you to those of you who continue to support us financially. You can join them by going to unsafespace.com. You get your name and the credits, you get in Discord. Also, in addition to Dangerous Thoughts, your contribution to Unsafe Space supports other shows. Earlier today, we had a show called Rebel Civics. We do this. That's also every Wednesday. That's with Keith, and he actually introduced something called Rebel Civics Academy, which is kind of an evergreen series about topics that kind of basic civics education. And the one that was today was the first in the Rebel Civics Academy series, and it was about the Constitution of the United States, and it was designed so that if you're a teacher, I don't know if everyone knows, but there's a Constitution Day is like a federally mandated thing, which is ironic since it's unconstitutional to federally mandate that, and the entire Department of Education is unconstitutional. But anyway, it's a constitutionally mandated thing. Teachers are supposed to talk about the Constitution. Many of them don't know what to do. This is a course that actually fulfills that requirement. Keith has taught this in schools in Florida before to fulfill that requirement. So we're releasing that as the beginning of this series. So if you're in education or know anyone in education, just grab that and go play it in your classroom. Also on Tuesdays, we have 451 Degrees with Alex Maselli. She talks about big tech and censorship. Mondays, we have Narrative Dissonance with Juliet Dillon and me. And tomorrow, every Thursday, we have something for the nerds. And that's Token Minority Report, which is hosted by Beverly and Alex. Also, as a reminder, book club coming up September 25th is the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. No, it's not a satanic text. And October 30th, Slaughterhouse-5 by Kurt Vonnegut, hosted by Juliet. So thanks again, everyone. I will see you on Monday for Narrative Dissonance. And Beverly and Alex will see you tomorrow, if you're so inclined, to chat about pop culture on Token Minority Report. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care, and democracy! Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you're new to Unsafe Space, Check out our deep content library that includes discussions with everyone from James Lindsay to Brett Weinstein. And please consider helping to fund our work by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on a variety of social media platforms, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space Discord server, which is open to financial supporters at any level. We hope to see you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. It would be better for your health if you forgot what you just heard. That should be easy for someone of your intelligence. The following co-conspirators are hereby ordered to watch CNN. Experts agree that 87,000 new tax collectors will make inflation feel like less of a problem. I think we can agree that the FBI's track record speaks for itself. If you think about it, only government-sanctioned experts should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.